Hi everyone. So we're going to start transitioning away from Illustrator and into Photoshop. So I'm going to launch this right here on my dock, and just like Illustrator, I'll be using Creative Cloud and specifically the 2015 version, and have like the Illustrator probably CS5 and up, or excuse me, I'm sorry, Photoshop CS5 and up. So you'll be good in CS5, CS6, older versions of Creative Cloud. Even if you have the newer one, the 2017 Cloud, you'll probably be able to be fine as well. So, while this is booting up, let's just ask the question: what is Photoshop? Photoshop essentially is a pixel editing software, and while it's similar to Illustrator, it's different in general. What I would recommend is I would say I've got a lot of windows open, so I'm going to go ahead and do what I normally do in those situations. I'm going to reset my essentials, and there we go. And that's what Photoshop looks like upon first load. And yeah, so I would kind of classify it in a way where Adobe is kind of like a bakery, right? And they make all different kinds of, treats, if you will. And, they're really good at making cakes. And Illustrator is like a cake, right? And it's birthday cake. And you can, have all the different flavors, and you can put all different kinds of frosting on it. But at the end of the day, it's cake. And if you like one piece of birthday cake, most likely you'll like another piece of birthday cake, right? That's Illustrator. Photoshop's also cake. It's just not birthday cake. It's cheesecake. There's some similarities in the fact that they're both called cake, the fact that you cut them into wedges or squares, and the fact that you eat them with a fork. But then there's some differences. Like if you think of the texture of birthday cake versus the texture of cheesecake, totally different. Not that one's bad and not that one's good, but they're just different from one another. If you think about frosting, right? You put a certain kind of frosting or icing on birthday cake, and rather than having that on cheesecake, you tend to get like drizzled on cherries. Again, still good though, just different. And that's what it's like when you're dealing with Photoshop and Illustrator. There are similarities, but there are definitely differences. So, just like I did with Illustrator when I first started teaching you that, I went ahead and I created myself a workspace. I just went ahead and I had a tall toolbar, and I made a short toolbar, and I got rid of all the extra kind of windows, and I'm just going to start out with layers, okay? And I'm going to open up windows as we go. Layers are essential in Photoshop, even more so than they were in Illustrator, and that's probably going to be one of our first lessons. So I'm going to go ahead and make my workspace. So I'm going to say new workspace, and I'm just going to call it Nick PS Demos, for Nick Photoshop Demos, and I'll say save. And now when I go ahead and I reset my workspace, these two boxes, my toolbar and my layers, will be the only thing that comes up. So let's make a new window or a new document. So file and new, and right now it's already different. The one reason that Photoshop and Illustrator are different from one another is Illustrator, as you've learned, is built on this concept of vectors. Vectors are mathematically based artworks, and they're great because basically what we have is we've got a grid of sorts, and we go ahead and equations decide where our points are, and then we pull out the curves or the lines, and we create this mathematical piece of artwork. And essentially what we do is we can scale it larger or smaller, and it's always going to be crisp and clear, and it's resolution independent. That was a vector. Photoshop is based on pixels. Pixels are small squares of color information, and there's a lot of them in many images. And essentially, they are not resolution independent, which means that when you start a document, you need to go ahead and understand pixels right away, because we have a width, we have a height, and then we have resolution. And resolution is measured in the amount of pixels in an inch. So let's go ahead and let's just do a 1 inch by 1 inch document, and let's just make it 100 pixels per inch, and we'll say okay to that. And this is what it looks like, a little square. And I'm going to zoom in a few times. Oh, and it looks like I do not have my pixel grid turned on, so let's turn that on. Help is a wonderful function here. So I knew what it was called. It's under View, Show, and Pixel Grid. There we are. And so I want that turned on. View, Show, Pixel Grid. Ooh, let's try that one more time. View, Show, Pixel Grid. And let's zoom in even more. It's kind of tough to see, maybe. Ah, there it is. I just needed to apply a color. And then we can see it. So as you can see, right, we have all these little squares. And there's a lot of them there, right? That, my friends, that is our pixel grid. And so each one of these represents some information, some color information. And the way that Photoshop works is we look at these things not on a zoomed in level like this, but we looked at them really zoomed out. And there are other pieces of color information next to the one that exists, and they all start to blend together, and they become what we call a continuous tone image, which is just a fancy word for a photograph. So I'll zoom out to our 1x1 square, and I'm actually going to not really do much with this other than talk to you a little bit about the concept of layers, okay, because it's really important. So what we have is we have this thing called a background layer, and I'm going to increase my panel options there, so make them nice and big. There we go. So we have a background layer. Every time there's a brand new document in Illustrator, it's called background, okay? And the way it works essentially is that I could go ahead and I could paint on it if I want, or I could draw on it, or I could edit on it, and I could do all sorts of different things, right? But if I go ahead and I click on it and I make something on it like this, then it inherently sticks to the layer, okay? It's like I'm painting with glue every time I paint. So if I go ahead and I try to, let's say, move that, not only will it not because the layer's locked, but I can't separate what I just drew onto that layer. Well, that's kind of weird. Yeah, it kind of is. So let's try something fun. I'm going to open up my photo booth and take a picture of myself, because I don't take myself nearly that serious, or too seriously. And let's see. Here I am. I'm going to smile. Cool. So I'm going to take this picture of myself, and I'm literally going to drag it right into Photoshop. Photoshop will read it as a picture file and open it up. So here I am. Here's me. And there's that background that I talked about before. Now, if I want to give myself like a fiendish mustache, I can do it. Just like this. And don't worry, I'm going to explain the tools in detail, just like I did in Illustrator. Okay? But I want you to understand layers. Alright, here I am. Here's a fiendish mustache and a goatee. And at the end of the day, that is stuck on there. I can't take it off. I can't remove it. I can, at best, do something like this. Select it, and then go ahead and move it somewhere else. But watch what happens. Oh no. Oops. Look at that. I created a hole in my face. Why did it do that? Because it's not Illustrator. This is one of those things I was talking about, how they're not the same. And what I mean by they're not the same is that Illustrator, everything was an object, right? And even though we can put 50 objects on the same layer, and we can still select them independently of one another, or we could turn them all on and off at the same time visually, or we could select them all at the same time if we felt like it, but we could always individually select them. Unfortunately, we cannot here. So what we really need to talk about is this concept of layers. And our layer palette is similar enough, yet it's different. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to make a new layer, and if I take a look at all these symbols, try to explain them all at once, they're going to be confusing. So let's just do the basics. So this one here that looks like a trash can, that's exactly what it is. That's for trash layers. That's when you make a layer and you don't want it anymore. The one next to it that looks like a folded piece of paper, that one is new layer. So I'm going to click on that. And just like Illustrator, I can name my layers. So I'm just going to literally roll up here where it says layer 1, and I'm going to call it Nick's mustache, because that's what I'm going to make. I'm going to make a mustache. And then I'm going to see where it says background. Well, I'm going to double click on that, and this comes up. Whoa, what's this, right? This is basically how we change our layer or background layer to a real layer. So it just allows me to go ahead and put my name in there. After I do that, I can double click on my name and it'll change all the time. This, guys, this is known as the thumbnail, just like it was in Illustrator, and this little eyeball will toggle our visibility on and off. So I can make a mustache for myself really easy, and I can put it on here. There's my fiendish mustache and little soul patch, okay, right? And that's cool, and that works. And I can turn my Nick layer off, and there's the mustache. And I can turn my mustache layer off, and there's me, okay? And it's all working out okay. Great, yeah, pretty cool. So I'm going to jump to the internet really quick. And I'm going to be silly. And I'm going to say cowboy mustache and see what I find. There we are. Cool. So I'm going to say cut out. Just what I was looking for right here. Okay. So let's go ahead and open up this image. And that's what I'm talking about, guys, right there. I'm going to drag this into Photoshop. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take this image. And again, I'm going to teach you more about this stuff as we go along. So if you're confused right now, it's cool. You're just here to watch the show. And watch. I'm going to go ahead and take my mustache here. I'm going to drag this to this file. And it's huge, and that's okay. We're going to just go ahead and make it a little bit smaller. That looks pretty good. And I'm going to name this one Cowboy Mustache. I'm going to turn Nick's mustache off, and I'm going to put the cowboy mustache on me. How's that look? Well, it looks kind of weird because it's right up in my nostril there. So let's go ahead, make it maybe a little smaller. And yeah, check it out. That's what I would look like if I ran a saloon in the 1800s Wild West. Just like that. In fact, I'm sure that if I check out Ancestry.com, I probably have like a long lost relative that looks like that. So what I'm getting at here is that we can do this in a way where we can work what we call non-destructively. And that's really important when it comes to Photoshop. We want to work not as non-destructive as possible. And we are going to build up layers on a regular basis. It makes our file sizes a little bit bigger, but at the end of the day, it's a much smarter way to work in Photoshop, is to work non-destructively, and it leaves us what I like to call backdoors. So then that way, if we screw up, we can fall back on something, so it's not a big deal. Lastly, before I end this video and start to move forward in the real ones, because it's just kind of an introduction video, I think I'm just going to give myself a 10-gallon hat, because I kind of have to at this point. So let's go ahead and Google that. 10-gallon hat. Oh, there we are. That one right there looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and view this image, drop this in Photoshop, and go ahead. I'm doing what's known as a selection, something I will be teaching you about a lot. That's pretty good. Inverse. And here I am. It's a little big, so let's make it smaller. All right. Howdy, partner. You ready to do some Photoshop? Because I am. All right. Yeah, I had to do that to myself. You'll find that while we're playing around in Photoshop in the beginning, the best thing that you can do is to just have some fun. Use pictures of yourself. That way, you'll go ahead and you may make some more ethical decisions, since you don't want to probably screw up with your own faces or heads or anything like that. We'll go from there. So we're going to first get into a little bit more about resolution and pixels. Then we're going to really focus on the ins and outs of layers, and then we're going to start getting into effects. And we'll spend the next module and a half talking about Photoshop. Thank you.